The emergency klaxons screamed through the massive crystal halls of the Galactic Council station. The sound made every alien delegate's skin crawl with fear. Ambassador Thexval of the Velen Collective appeared suddenly in the center of the HE's chamber, his see-through body glowing bright red with panic. "Emergency session now," Dexval shouted, his voice shaking so badly the universal translators struggled to keep up. "The humans are coming. All of them." The enormous chamber fell silent. Representatives from 47 different worlds stopped their conversations and turned to stare. The Andromedan delegates' tentacles went stiff with terror. The insect-like Kithra clicked their mandibles nervously. Even the mighty Gorvani warriors, who stood 8 feet tall and had skin like living metal, took a step back. "How many ships?" asked Chancellor Vexmora, the ancient leader of the council. Her 4 eyes blinked rapidly as she waited for the answer she dreaded. "Over 200 vessels," Chancellor Dexval replied, his form flickering like a broken hologram. "Their entire first fleet is moving toward the Kepler 442 system. Energy readings suggest they're carrying enough firepower to crack a planet." In half, a wave of terrified whispers swept through the chamber. The Velen delegate continued, "They'll reach the agricultural colonies in less than 6 hours. What? 3 billion innocent farmers and their families are about to become the first victims of human expansion." Everyone in the chamber knew the stories about humanity. Earth was a nightmare world where everything tried to kill you. The oceans were filled with creatures that could swallow starships whole. The land crawled with predators that hunted in packs. The very air was poisonous to most galactic species. And the humans themselves were the worst monsters of all. "Remember the Titan Station incident?" whispered Ambassador Krell of the Hegemony. "One human transport ship had engine trouble. When they docked for repairs, their security team killed 12 armed pirates with their bare hands. They didn't even use weapons. They were just cargo haulers," added another delegate. "Not even soldiers." The stories were endless and terrifying. Humans who could survive in the vacuum of space for minutes without suits? Humans who drank liquid that would dissolve most alien species from the inside out. Humans who thought radiation was just an inconvenience. It came from a world where the ground shook daily, where storms could level cities, where the star itself tried to burn everything alive. "What do we do?" asked the Andromedan representative, his tentacles writhing with fear. "Our defense fleets are scattered across the outer rim. We have nothing that can stop them." Meanwhile, millions of miles away in hyperspace, Captain Duhayan Kim stood calmly on the bridge of the UES Thunderstrike. The ship was massive, built like a flying fortress with armor plating thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. But right now, it felt small compared to the weight of their mission. Duhayan was 45 years old, with gray streaks in his black hair and scars on his hands from years of space combat. He had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species across 3 different star systems, but he had never seen anything like the reports coming from Kepler 44b. "Fleet status report," he ordered. His voice steady and calm, Commander Giwu Park stood beside him, her fingers flying over the holographic displays that showed the positions of all 212 human ships. She was younger than the captain, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and reflexes that had saved the ship more times than anyone could count. "All vessels maintaining formation, sir," she reported. "The Sol, Busan, and Daegu are running point. The medical ships are in the center, surrounded by our heavy cruisers. Admiral Lee's flagship is coordinating from the rear." "Any word from the colonies?" Duhayan asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Jiwoo's expression darkened. "Sir, we're picking up hundreds of evacuation broadcasts. It's not from the emergency they're facing, but because of us. I think we're coming to invade them." Duhayan closed his eyes for a moment. 5 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the galactic community, they had hoped for friendship and cooperation. Instead, they found fear and suspicion everywhere they went. It didn't matter that humans had never started a war with any alien species. It didn't matter that Earth's government had bent over backwards to prove they were peaceful. All the other species saw were the predators from the Deathworld. "Captain, look at this," Giwu said, pointing to her screen. "The Kepler colonies are broadcasting their evacuation routes to warn other ships to stay away from us. They're telling everyone that the human fleet is heading straight for them with hostile intent. The irony was bitter as poison. They were racing through hyperspace to save those very same colonies from something far worse than any human army. The distress signals from Kepler 44 to be painted a picture of horror that made even seasoned soldiers nervous. An enemy that ate light itself. Creatures that existed in multiple dimensions at once. A threat so terrible that the colonists' own weapons were completely useless against it. "Sir, message from Admiral Lee," the communications officer announced. "He wants to know if we should broadcast our true intentions to calm the panic." Duhayan shook his head. "No point. They wouldn't believe us anyway. Keep course and maintain speed. When we drop out of hyperspace, they'll see what we're really here to do." As the human fleet raced toward their destination, panic spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had never spoken to each other suddenly found themselves united. In fear of the approaching human armada, Lieutenant Minho Yoon rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the communications console for the 100th time that day. The young officer had been sitting in the same chair aboard the UES Stormbreaker for 18 straight hours, trying to make sense of the chaos coming from Kepler 44b. The distress signals were unlike anything he had ever heard in his 5 years of military service. The first transmissions had been normal emergency broadcasts, asking for medical supplies and evacuation assistance. But as the hours passed, the messages became stranger and more terrifying. Words like shadow creatures and darkness that drinks light kept appearing in the static-filled communications. Most of the other communication officers in the fleet had dismissed these reports as panic-induced hallucinations. After all, the Kepler colonies were known for their peaceful farmers and simple lifestyle. What kind of threat could possibly overwhelm 3 billion people so completely? But Minho had a gift for hearing patterns in the noise. His grandfather had been a radio operator during Earth's old wars. He had taught Minho that the truth was always hidden somewhere in the static. You just had to know how to listen. "Computer, run filter pattern 7 alpha on transmission." "Batch 447, Minho commanded, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The AI began cleaning up the garbled audio, removing interference and boosting the signal strength. What emerged from the static made Minho's blood run cold. The voice was clearly Andromedan. That musical quality their species was famous for. But this voice was broken, filled with terror that no amount of static could hide. Minho had heard fear before, but this was different.
Ow.
This was the sound of someone who had seen the end of everything they loved. "Admiral Lee needs to hear this immediately," Minho whispered to himself, his hands shaking as he prepared the clean transmission. Admiral Kyun-Soo Lee stood in the command center of the UES Sovereign, the flagship of humanity's first fleet. The massive ship was over 2 kilometers long and housed nearly 10,000 crew members. Its bridge was a marvel of human engineering, holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in the fleet and real-time data from dozens of star systems. At 52, Admiral Lee had gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from years of making impossible decisions. He had led the evacuation of the Titan mining colonies when their star went supernova. He had commanded the fleet that stopped the Zephyrian pirates from enslaving the Outer Rim settlements. But the expression on Lieutenant Minho's face told him this was something entirely different. "Play it," Lee ordered, his voice calm despite the knot of worry growing in his stomach. The bridge fell silent as the transmission filled the air. Colony Administrator Veltana's voice echoed through the command center, each word dripping with desperation. Day 17 of the crisis. The darkness continues to spread across the northern continent. We've lost contact with Settlements Alpha. Through Gamma, our defense forces report that conventional weapons have no effect on the creatures. They seem to absorb energy itself, growing stronger with each attack. The transmission crackled with static before continuing. "I've seen the footage from the front lines. These things aren't like anything in our databases. They move like liquid shadow, but they're solid enough to tear through reinforced walls. Our scientists believe they're not entirely from our dimension. They phase in and out of reality, making them nearly impossible to track or target." Admiral Lee's jaw tightened as he listened. In 30 years of military service, he had never heard such raw terror in an official report. The worst part is what they do to our technology. Every energy weapon we fire at them makes them stronger. Our plasma cannons, our ion batteries, even our force fields feed these monsters. It's like they're designed to counter everything we know about warfare. The voice paused, and they could hear explosions in the background. Die the void. They're eating the very light from our suns. The star itself is growing dimmer.
Oh.
If someone doesn't stop these creatures soon, they'll consume this entire system and move on to the next one. We've sent evacuation requests to every government in the galaxy, but who's going to help a bunch of farmers fight monsters from another dimension? The transmission ended with a burst of static that made everyone on the bridge wince. Commander Hajin Choi, the fleet's chief science officer, immediately began running analysis on the audio. His console lit up with data streams and energy readings that painted a picture of something impossible. Admiral, the quantum signatures in that transmission are off the charts, Hejin reported, his usually calm voice tight with concern. Whatever these creatures are, they're manipulating dark matter in ways we've never seen before. They're not just consuming regular matter, they're eating the fabric of space-time itself. Explain it in simple terms, Commander, Lee ordered. Think of reality like a piece of cloth, sir. These creatures are eating holes in that cloth, and the holes are getting bigger. If they're not stopped, they could potentially unravel the quantum structure of the entire star system. Captain Duhans. The voice suddenly crackled over the communication system from the UES Thunderstrike. Admiral, we're 30 seconds from dropping out of hyperspace. All ships report ready for immediate deployment. Put the visual feed on the main screen. Lee commanded. The massive holographic display in the center of the bridge flickered to life, showing the approaching Kepler 442 system. What they saw made even the most experienced officers gasp in shock. Kepler 442b had once been called the Garden of the Galaxy for its beautiful blue oceans and green continents. The planet was famous for producing the finest crops in known space, feeding dozens of other worlds with its agricultural exports. Now, half the planet was covered in writhing shadows that moved like living things.
Oh.
The northern continent was completely black, as if someone had poured ink across the entire landmass. But this wasn't ordinary darkness. This was something that seemed to absorb light itself. My God, whispered Commander Giwoo Park from the Thunderstrike. It's like the planet is being eaten alive. As they watched, the shadow began to spread across the ocean, moving like a massive oil spill that defied all laws of physics. Islands disappeared into the darkness, their lights winking out one by one. Energy readings are spiking across the entire system, Hajin reported. The creatures are feeding on the star's radiation, and it's causing solar flares that are disrupting communications across 3 neighboring systems. Admiral Lee stared at the dying planet and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. All ships, prepare for immediate deployment. We're going in. All ships, this is Admiral Lee. Deploy drop pods immediately. We're going in hard and fast. The command echoed through every human vessel in the fleet. Within seconds, the bellies of 200 ships opened like blooming flowers, releasing thousands of armored drop pods toward the dying planet below. Each pod was a marvel of human engineering. It's designed to survive impacts that would turn most alien technology into scrap metal. Captain So Young unstrapped herself into the lead pod, her heart pounding as the launch sequence began. At 34, she was one of the youngest captains in the fleet, but her record spoke for itself. She had led ground operations on 17 different worlds. From the ice caves of Hoth Prime to the lava fields of Mustafar Station, first wave, sound off, she commanded through her helmet come. Bravo squad ready, Captain, came the reply from Sergeant Taemin Lee, a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts. Charlie squad locked and loaded, reported Corporal Sunwoo Kim, barely 21, but already a legend among the Marines for his skill with heavy weapons. Delta squad standing by, added Lieutenant Dong Wook Nam, the unit's demolitions expert who could make a bomb out of spare parts and chewing gum. The alien evacuation fleets watched in complete shock as the human pods streaked toward the planet's surface like falling stars. This went against every rule of space warfare that had been established over thousands of years of galactic conflict. They're insane. whispered Administrator Veltana from her escape ship, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. No one attacks a void swarm infestation with ground troops. You're supposed to glass the planet from orbit and hope the creatures die with it. Maybe that's why they're called Deathworlders, replied Captain Zexai of the Andromedon rescue vessel. They don't think like the rest of us. The first wave of pods smashed into the corrupted surface of Kepler-4 for 2Bs. Capital City with impacts that registered on seismic sensors across the planet. The pods were designed to hit hard and fast, their occupants protected by advanced shock absorption systems that could survive a direct hit from a meteor. Sajong's pod cracked open like an egg. She rolled out with her weapon ready. The sight that greeted her was something from a nightmare. The city that had once housed 2 million peaceful farmers was now a twisted landscape of shadow and corruption. Buildings stood like broken teeth, their walls flowing like liquid as the void creatures consumed them from within. The very air seemed thick and wrong, as if reality itself was being digested by invisible mouths. Streetlights flickered and died as the shadows drank their energy, leaving only the eerie glow from the humans' equipment. Formation Alpha, move out, Sa Young ordered, her voice steady despite the horror around her. The shadow creatures sensed their presence immediately. Dozens of writhing forms began flowing toward the human landing zone like a tide of living darkness. These weren't like any alien species in the galactic databases, okay? They had no fixed shape, no obvious weak points, and they moved with a hunger that was almost intelligent. Contact front, shouted Sergeant Taman as the first wave of creatures reached their position. The void spawn looked like someone had taken pure darkness and given it teeth. They flowed across the ground like liquid shadow, but when they struck solid objects, they hit with the force of runaway freight trains. Tendrils of entropy reached out from their forms, trying to drain the life from anything they touched. Remember? Your training, Soyoung barked into her come. These things feed on energy, so we go primitive. Kinetic weapons only. No plasma, no lasers, no energy shields. This was the moment when humanity's reputation as Deathworlders truly showed its value. While every other species in the galaxy had evolved toward energy-based warfare, humans had never completely abandoned the old ways. They still understood the simple effectiveness of throwing rocks really, really fast. The human Marines opened fire with weapons that most aliens considered obsolete. Railguns that fired tungsten slugs at incredible velocities, chemical explosive, rounds that detonated with old-fashioned fire and shrapnel, kinetic weapons that relied on mass and momentum rather than exotic energy. The effect was immediate and devastating. Where the colonists' advanced plasma weapons had only made the creatures stronger, the humans' primitive projectiles tore through the shadow forms like paper. The void spawn recoiled in confusion, their quantum matrices disrupted by the simple physics of high-velocity metal. "They're working," Corporal Sunwoo shouted as he mowed down a cluster of creatures with his heavy machine gun. The slugs are actually hurting them. Lieutenant Dong Wook Nam pulled a special canister from his pack, one of hundreds that had been loaded aboard the human ships at the last minute. "Spore deployment, get ready." He lobbed the canister into the middle of the largest group of shadow creatures. It burst open in midair, releasing a cloud of what looked like ordinary mushroom spores. But these weren't ordinary fungi. They were genetically modified organisms from Earth's deepest caves, designed by human scientists to survive in the harshest environments imaginable. The spores began to spread through the air, and wherever they touched the void creatures, the shadows began to writhe and dissolve. The fungi had been engineered to interfere with dark matter cohesion, turning the creatures' own exotic physics against them. Biological warfare, Sa-Young said with grim satisfaction. Leave it to humans to weaponize mushrooms. The battle raged through the ruined streets as more human pods landed across the city. Each squad brought their own specialties. Some carried flamethrowers that burned with chemical fire hot enough to disrupt quantum fields. Others deployed sonic weapons that used sound waves to shatter the creatures. Dimensional stability? The alien evacuation fleets watched in stunned silence as their monitors showed the impossible. The unstoppable void swarm was being pushed back by beings they had considered primitive savages. The creatures that had consumed half a planet were retreating from humans armed with what amounted to fancy rocks and fire. "How is this possible?" Administrator Veltana whispered, her tentacles twitching with disbelief. "They're not fighting the creatures," observed Dr. Kethmer, the fleet's chief scientist. "They're fighting the physics that allow the creatures to exist. They're using the creatures' own interdimensional nature against them." As the human forces advanced through the city, alien refugees began to realize a truth that would reshape galactic politics forever. The terrifying Deathworlders weren't conquering Kepler-44 to be. They were saving it. The ground began to shake so violently that even the human Marines, trained for combat in the worst conditions imaginable, struggled to keep their footing. Captain So Young-on felt the vibrations through her armored boots as cracks spread across the city streets like spider webs. But this wasn't an ordinary earthquake. The seismic readings on her display showed something impossible. "All units, fall back to evacuation points," she commanded into her com, her voice tight with concern. "Something big is coming." Aboard the U.S. Sovereign, Admiral Lee gripped the railing of the command deck as the entire ship shuddered. The flagship was holding position 20,000 kilometers above the planet's surface. But even at that distance, they could feel the massive disturbance building in Kepler-4 for 2B's core. "Sir, energy readings are off the charts," Commander Inho. SEO reported from the sensor station, his face pale as he stared at his displays. "Whatever's down there, it's the size of a small moon and it's moving toward the surface." "Could it be a volcanic eruption?" asked Commander Hagen Choi, though. His voice suggested he already knew the answer was no. "Negative, sir. This is something alive. The energy signature is organic, but it's unlike anything in our databases. It's like the planet itself has been gestating this thing." The tactical display showed a three-dimensional map of Kepler-4 for to be. With a massive red dot rising from the planet's molten core toward the surface, the thing was moving slowly but steadily, leaving a trail of disrupted matter in its wake. On the surface, Sol Young's Marines were running for their lives as the ground beneath the capital city began to collapse inward. Buildings that had survived the initial Void Swarm attack were now falling into sinkholes that seemed to lead straight to hell. "Captain, look at this!" shouted Lieutenant Dong Wook Nam, pointing at his scanner. "The entire city is sinking into some kind of massive crater. It's like something the size of a mountain is pushing up from below." Then they saw it. The Void Queen erupted from Kepler-4 for 2B's crust like a nightmare made real. It was impossible to describe in words that any sane mind could process. The creature was larger than most space stations, a writhing mass of living shadow that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Where the smaller void creatures had been like drops of liquid darkness, this was an ocean of entropy given form and consciousness. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around the Queen's presence. The very air became thick and wrong, as if the laws of physics were being rewritten moment by moment. The creature's form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as a massive spider made of starlight and shadow, other times as a tentacled horror that stretched across the horizon. "My God," whispered Captain Duhayan from the bridge of the Thunderstrike. "It's beautiful and terrible at the same time." The Queen began to feed immediately. The planet's molten core was drawn up into its body like water through a straw. Entire mountain ranges collapsed as the creature consumed the very foundations of the world. But worse than the physical destruction was what it did to space-time itself. "Admiral, the creature is generating gravitational anomalies," reported Commander In-ho, his voice shaking. "It's not just eating the planet's matter. It's consuming the quantum foam that holds reality together." "Conventional weapons report," Captain Duhayan, Admiral Lee, ordered, though he already suspected what the answer would be. "Useless, sir. The thing exists in 11 dimensions. Simultaneously, most of our weapons can't even touch it." The alien evacuation fleets had pulled back to what they thought was a safe distance. But even from 50,000 kilometers away, their ship's instruments were going crazy. The Void Queen's presence was disrupting sensors, communications, and even basic navigation systems. "It's going to consume the entire system," Administrator Veltana whispered from her rescue ship. "Once it finishes with the planet, it'll move on to the star. Then the neighboring systems. Nothing can stop something like that." "But Admiral Lee, was staring at a classified file on his personal display. Project Prometheus, a weapon so dangerous that only 12 people in the entire human fleet knew it existed. A dark matter torpedo that could theoretically destroy anything, but it came with a price that made even hardened soldiers sick to their stomachs. The torpedo has to be manually guided to the target, he explained to his senior staff over a secure channel. The dark matter guidance system requires constant human input to navigate through dimensional barriers. But the pilot would have to fly through 11 different layers of reality to reach the Queen's core. What's the survival rate? Duhayan? For any known alien species? 0. The dimensional transition would tear apart their molecular structure instantly. And for humans? Admiral Lee was quiet for a long moment, maybe 5%. Our Deathworld evolution might give us enough durability to survive the trip. Maybe. Silence on the cum channel was deafening. Everyone understood what he was. Asking someone had to volunteer for a suicide mission to save 3 billion innocent lives. I'll take it. Captain So-young's voice came through the static, calm and determined. Negative. I'll go, Captain Duhayan replied immediately. Like hell you will, interrupted Commander Ji-woo Park. I'm the best pilot in the fleet. Within seconds, the cum channel was flooded with volunteers. Every ship captain, every squadron leader, every Marine officer was volunteering to fly the mission. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. The kind that proved everything the galaxy believed about. Humanity was wrong. They weren't savage conquerors or mindless killers. They were protectors who would give their lives for strangers without hesitation. Quiet, Admiral Lee shouted. So-young, you led the ground assault. The mission is yours, but volunteers only. Understood, sir, So-young replied. I'll need a small team to maximize our chances. Captain, this is Sergeant Taemin. I'm in, Corporal Sun-woo reporting. Let's finish this. Lieutenant Dong-wook here. Someone needs to arm the warhead. Commander Ji-woo, requesting permission to pilot the bomber. Within 5 minutes, So-young had more volunteers than she could use. Her entire squad plus officers, from 3 different ships, volunteered for a mission that would almost certainly kill them all. The specially modified fighter was prepared in record time. It was unlike any ship ever built, with experimental shielding designed to protect the crew during dimensional transitions. The dark matter torpedo was mounted beneath the craft, its alien technology humming with barely contained power as the team prepared to launch. Admiral Veltana's voice came over the open channel from the alien evacuation fleet. Humans of the EHE First Fleet, we have watched you fight and die for people who are not your own. We have seen you sacrifice everything to protect those who feared you. We were wrong about your species. You are not Deathworlders. You are Guardians. So-young smiled inside her helmet as the fighter launched from the Sovereign's Bay. All right, team. Let's show this monster what humans are really made of. The fighter began to phase through reality itself, disappearing from normal spacetime as it entered the first dimensional layer. Through the viewports, the crew could see colors that had no names and shapes that shouldn't exist. The journey to the Queen's core had begun. 7 days after the battle that changed everything, Kepler 44 to be slowly rotated in the darkness of space, like a wounded giant. The planet bore deep scars from the Void Queen's emergence, with massive craters where entire cities had once stood. But it was alive, and that was what mattered. The northern continent, which had been completely consumed by shadow just a week ago, was now covered in a strange golden moss. The genetically modified fungi that Lieutenant Dong-wook had deployed had not only destroyed the remaining void creatures, but had evolved to heal the damaged ecosystem. Human science had turned a weapon of war into an instrument of renewal. Captain. So-young stood in the medical bay of the UES Sovereign, her body wrapped in healing bandages that glowed with advanced medical nanobots. The dimensional journey had nearly killed her, aging her cells by what doctors estimated to be 10 years in the span of 30 minutes. Her hair, once jet black, now had streaks of silver at the temples. But she was alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. Captain, final casualty report, said Medical Officer Dr. Min-young Park, her voice soft with respect. 47 of our people didn't make it home. 32 from the ground assault, 15 from the dimensional mission support teams. Sol Young closed her eyes and felt the weight of every name on that list. Sergeant Taemin Lee, who had volunteered for every dangerous mission since joining the fleet. Corporal Sun Woo Kim, barely 21, who had saved her life twice during the city battle. Lieutenant Dongwook Nam, whose brilliant mind had figured out how to weaponize Earth's mushrooms. Against interdimensional parasites, they died heroes, she said quietly. Make sure their families know that. Already done, Captain. Admiral Lee sent personal messages to every family. The entire fleet is planning a memorial service when we get back to Earth. Through the medical bay's viewport, Soyeon could see the massive rescue operation taking place around Kepler-442b. Human ships worked alongside alien vessels to evacuate the remaining colonists and begin the long process of planetary recovery. It was the first time in galactic history that such cooperation had happened on this scale. On the observation deck of the Sovereign, Admiral Lee stood watching the rescue ships ferry survivors to safety. The sight of alien and human crews working together filled him with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope for the future, a familiar shimmer in the air announced the arrival of Ambassador Thexville. The Velen diplomat's translucent form no longer flickered with fear or panic. Instead, he pulsed with colors that the universal translator identified as deep gratitude and respect. Admiral Lee, Thexville said, his voice steady for the first time since they had met. I must ask something that has been troubling me for days. Why did your people sacrifice so much for colonies that aren't even human? You lost 47 brave souls for strangers who feared and hated you, Lee continued, watching the rescue operation for a moment before answering. My grandfather once told me something when I was young. He said that the measure of a person isn't how they treat their friends, but how they treat those who can do nothing for them in return. But surely your government, your people, they must have expected something in return. Trade agreements, territorial rights, political influence. The Admiral shook his head. Ambassador, you still don't understand us. We didn't come here because we had to. We came because they needed help. That's reason enough for any decent person. His form pulsed with confusion, but that's not how galactic politics work. Every species acts in their own self-interest.
Ow.
That's the foundation of interstellar relations. Been the problem, Lee replied. Maybe it's time for a new foundation. 3 weeks later, the first official alien distress call arrived at Earth's Stellar Command headquarters. The massive facility, built into the Rocky Mountains, had been receiving unofficial messages for days. Reports of human heroism had spread across the galaxy faster than any government could control. General Yoon Ji-cho, the head of Stellar Command, read the message aloud to the assembled staff. To the human Deathworlder fleet, from the Rigel 7 Colonial Authority, unknown, hostile entities are attacking our outer settlements. Our defense forces are overwhelmed. We formally request immediate assistance from Earth's Guardian Fleet. We understand now that you are not conquerors, but protectors. Please help us. The room fell silent. This was the first time in human history that an alien government had officially asked for military assistance. More importantly, they had called humans guardians instead of Deathworlders. Admiral Lee, who had been promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander after the Kepler incident, smiled as he looked at the tactical display showing the fleet positions. Signal all available ships. We're going to Rigel 7. Sir, asked Captain Doohian, who had been transferred to Earth for the ceremony. What about the other distress calls? We've received 17 more since yesterday. We'll help them all, Lee replied. Split the fleet into rapid response groups. Every call for help gets answered. The reputation of humanity began to spread, like wildfire through the galactic communication networks. The story of Kepler-442b was told and retold, growing more legendary with each telling. But the core truth remained the same. When faced with an impossible enemy, humans had sacrificed everything to save people who weren't even their own species. The Andromedan News Network ran daily stories about human rescue operations. The Kithra Broadcasting Service created documentaries about human military tactics. Even the proud Gorvani warriors, who had never admitted respect for any other species, began studying human combat methods. But it wasn't just military prowess that impressed the galaxy. It was something deeper, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligent life. Humans didn't just fight for territory or resources or political advantage. They fought for strangers. They died for people they had never met and would never see again. 6 months after Kepler 4.4b, the phrase "call the Guardians" had become common slang across dozens of star systems. When pirates attacked trade routes, when natural disasters struck colony worlds, when unknown threats emerged from deep space, the first response was always the same: send a message to Earth. And the humans always answered: the UES Sovereign, now flagship of the Third Guardian Fleet, dropped out of hyperspace above a burning world in the Vega system. The crystalline collective's homeworld was under attack by mechanical invaders from another galaxy, their beautiful cities melting under waves of nanite swarms. "We're receiving the standard distress call," reported communications officer Young Ho Park. Lee nodded. "Reply with the standard response." The message that went out was simple, but it carried the weight of humanity's new reputation across the stars. "This is Admiral Lee of the Human Guardian Fleet. We hear your call for help. Hold on, we're coming." From that day forward, when civilizations faced extinction, when the darkness threatened to swallow the light, when hope seemed lost and all seemed doomed, they called for Earth's guardians, and the humans always answered, because that's what guardians do. The end.